Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, August 5th, 2022, and today we are going to be talking about the state of Arizona and the interesting picks that the Republican Party had chosen to be their nominees for 2022 in the Senate race and in the governor's race. Now, we've been talking about a lot about the primaries that occurred last Tuesday, or actually this past Tuesday is what I would rather refer to it as. We had the results in Kansas that showed that the abortion referendum failed by an astounding margin. The state of Michigan chose Tudor Dixon to be the Republican nominee. Eric Schmidt was chosen in the state of Missouri. You also saw that Valentine was also chosen in the state of Missouri. Beyond that, in the state of Washington, you found some interesting results, which we will cover in tomorrow's video. And overall, some very fascinating choices by the AZ GOP and many other GOPs across the nation. One thing that has really plagued the Republican Party's chances at victories across the nation this midterms are their inability to field strong and overall electable candidates. There are many Republicans out there that I have seen losing their primaries because President Trump has chosen somebody else, or maybe just the environment wasn't conducive to them winning the election. We saw this happen in the state of Arizona, more specifically with Attorney General Mark Brnovich, who started out as the frontrunner, then was vehemently attacked by President Trump, which President Trump propped up Blake Masters to replace Brnovich. Brnovich was that frontrunner, soon lost that lead very, very quickly after the attack started to run, and then ultimately ended up losing the primary. But as I have said pretty consistently, I believe that if Mark Brnovich had won this primary, Republicans probably would have locked down the state of Arizona by a pretty strong margin if he had remained as the frontrunner and been continuing to the general election. And when I say strong margin, you're talking maybe a 4 to 5 point lead in a state like Arizona, a swing state, but still a lead, whereas otherwise right now with Blake Masters, it doesn't look like they're on track to win. Heading over to the governor's race, I also had my own thoughts about the statement there, or the results there, because they chose Kari Lake, a TV personality, someone who had been endorsed by President Trump a year ago, who had been propelled by his endorsement, who barely won this primary. Now, Kari Lake started out as the very early frontrunner. She started out with some very high numbers. And throughout the entirety of the campaign, nobody really expected Kari Lake to win by such a narrow amount. I think the only pollster that really got close to where we actually saw this was Emerson College. But beyond that, Kari Lake was expected to win in many cases by double digits. She ended up winning with 89% reporting by about 3 points across the state. That lead might narrowly expand, but considering the amount of votes left, we're probably not going to see that much of a difference between the margin here in terms of now versus then. Overall looking, though, Kari Lake does win this primary, but I will say that she doesn't exactly strike me as this most electable candidate. I also brought up the point that if Karen Taylor Robson had won this primary, this race probably would be much more lopsided in favor of the GOP, largely because the two candidates on this ticket, Kari Lake and Blake Masters, are the least electable Republicans out of the entire group that decided to run. It's fascinating, to say the least, looking at some of these results and who the GOP chose to represent them this November in the state of Arizona, a state that rejected President Trump in the 2020 election. It's two people that were propped up solely by President Trump. Without President Trump, I believe that Karen Taylor Robson would have won this Republican primary. She received the endorsement from many, many top Republicans, received the endorsement from even Vice President Mike Pence. Donald Trump, of course, endorsed the opponent. That was actually a little bit of a proxy war between the two, and it looks like President Trump prevailed. In the Senate race here, Mark Brnovich, one of the stronger candidates in the race, if not the strongest that could have ran. Maybe Doug Ducey, I would say, is a bit stronger. But Mark Brnovich is the Attorney General. He's someone who was elected statewide, re-elected in 2018, did very well, outran the House Democrats or House Republicans, Senate Republicans by 4 or 5 points, depending on which one you're talking about. And yet when he runs for the Senate race, someone who has a tried and proven record in Arizona that he can be elected, he's rejected because of one simple thing. He certified the 2020 presidential election. Kari Lake and Blake Masters are very big proponents of Donald Trump's election lie. And I call it a lie because it is. It's not partisan to say the 2020 election was legitimate, fair, and safe, because at the end of the day, these propositions that the election was stolen from President Trump or rigged against him are ones that have only proven to hinder the GOP. We saw it in the Georgia runoff elections. We saw it in many of the elections that we have seen since. In addition to that, we are going to see it very well push back against some of these Republicans in districts that were more open to electing a more moderate Republican. We might see it in the state of Arizona. We might see it in the governor and Senate race, and it will be very, very interesting. But this video is more so a criticism of who the GOP decided to propel, who to prop up when it came down to these individual races. Because right now, the chances at victory aren't super high for the GOP. But months ago, they were certainly a lot better. The state of Arizona, again, is a state that was very close in the last presidential election. Joe Biden won it by 0.3%. It was a very narrow margin, yet Joe Biden was able to defeat Donald Trump for the first time for a Democrat on the presidential level since 1996. Looking at the Arizona results in 2020, it showed that it can go blue on the national level. On the statewide level, it proved that it could go blue in the House elections and in the Senate election. Today, as it stands, Arizona has 2 Democratic senators, Kyrsten Sinema, who I'm sure you heard a lot about, and Mark Kelly, who I'm also sure you have heard a lot about. Mark Kelly maintains a level of approval across the state that is propelled by independents and Democrats. Kyrsten Sinema maintains a level of independence that is propelled by independents and Republicans. But Kyrsten Sinema is a Democrat. But this video isn't about her. It's about the chances at victory for the Republican Party and their decreased, I would say, chance with Blake Masters as the nominee. I would encourage you to take a look at the expected narrowing of the race when it became more clear that Blake Masters was going to win the nomination, where now today, Mark Kelly has a better chance at winning re-election than he did 2 months ago. And the reason why I think that is super significant is because where we were 2 months ago, many Republicans, Democrats, independents, whoever might be, strategists in general, believed that this race was only going to get worse for the Democratic Party. In early 2021, it looked like they were easily on track to win control of the U.S. Senate, them being the Democrats. At some point in time, Democrats were expected to gain seats from the GOP. But as things started to get worse for the National Democratic Party and just better for a lot of these Republicans, it became much more difficult to see how Democrats retain control of the U.S. Senate. But in almost every single avenue where we have seen this happen, Arizona has been involved. And it's gotten a lot better for Democrats now than it was months ago. You can also see this on the political betting markets to a point where now, for the first time in a very long time in the state of Arizona, Democrats have a significantly higher chance over the GOP in this state. 3 months ago, Republicans had a practically 67% chance at victory in the state, according to the betting markets. Today, that has reduced down to just 42%. Now, these are yes shares that you buy and spend money on that, whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, you can sort of treat them as a percentage, because you also see this beyond the betting markets. You see this in reputable political forecasts. You see this in reputable pollsters. And we've seen it happen in years past, and Arizona did flip away from the GOP in 2018, and very well likely did in 2020, and is on track to do so, it seems, in 2022. And the reason for this convergence between Democrats and Republicans to a point where they are now crossing over each other and Democrats are in the more favorable position, it all comes down to the nominee, Blake Masters, who didn't start out as this frontrunner in the race. In fact, when you take a look at the betting markets and the polls and the expectations for the Republican primary in the state of Arizona, Blake Masters wasn't the immediate frontrunner. At different points in times, it could have been Jim Lamont, Mark Brnovich, Blake Masters. But the numbers that seem to coincide with the very dramatic rise in Blake Masters in his election coincides with the dramatic decrease in chances at victory for the Republican Party. That's very interesting, if you ask me. You also see a very similar thing happen in the governor's race. The political betting market showed the Republicans with, at different points, a 70% chance plus at victory in the governor's race. You know when the primary was just a few days ago? Well, guess what happened in the betting markets when we saw that Kari Lake won the nomination? Instantaneously, Democrats skyrocketed in terms of a chance at victory, the highest that they have been in the entirety of this betting market's history, all because of who the GOP nominated. It is very hard to ignore when one nominee changes the trajectory of the race. I said it before and I'll say it again. Karen Taylor Robson would have had this race on a likely Republican lockdown. Mark Brnovich would have had the Senate race on a lean Republican lockdown. But these two Republicans here only benefit by the wave year that it is and might win, but could have so easily had this race more in the Republican column had different nominees been chosen. The reason why these Republicans are competitive isn't because they are good Republicans. It's because of where we are on the national level. That is the only thing driving the GOP's chances to victory in the state of Arizona. If this was 2018, the governor's race, Democrats would practically have an automatic pickup. In the Senate race, easily winning re-election across the state, similar to how Democrats used 2018 to their advantage to easily win re-election in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Minnesota. These are states that were competitive in 2016, competitive in other Senate years, but 2018 was such a good year for the Democratic Party that Democrats were able to easily win re-election. 2022 is expected to be a very good year for the GOP, but they are struggling to lock down this state that only went to President Biden by such a narrow amount in the last election. What we are seeing happening in the state of Arizona is a direct response and a direct pushback against these GOP nominees. There is a very clear reason as to why these betting odds have jumped up dramatically in favor of the Democratic Party around the same time, if not at the exact same time, that these respective nominees were chosen for these very important races. People are less confident in the GOP when they nominate people like Kari Lake, like Blake Masters. Because honestly speaking, they don't have much more to offer than President Trump did in 2020. And that's the problem, because voters didn't like President Trump in 2020. And I get it. We are in a different national environment, and I will be the first one to tell you that. But the numbers just simply don't seem to be reflecting positively for the GOP in the state whatsoever. On the governor level, you're seeing Katie Hobbs lead in nearly every single number that we have seen thus far. In the Senate race, you are finding that Mark Kelly is ahead by about 9 points statewide. 9 points is larger than Mark Kelly's lead practically ever was in the 2020 election, and he went on to win by 2.4%, outperforming President Biden on the same ballot, meaning there were many, at least enough, Trump-Kelly voters that could roll over very easily into 2022 against the wrong GOP nominee. Mark Kelly did what many other Democrats were unable to do in 2020, and that was outperform President Biden in these down ballot races. And he very well could do it again in 2022. I get it. 2022 is not the best year for the Democratic Party. It doesn't look like their approval rating for Biden is high. It doesn't look like the generic ballot is going to move too far in favor of the Democratic Party, but things certainly are getting better, and it would be wrong to ignore that. The Democrats and the Republicans are nearly tied on the generic ballot. They were tied yesterday. Today, the Republicans maintain a lead of just 0.1%. The state of Arizona, being a state that voted about 4 points to the right of the nation in the last election, means that it should probably be a Republican state. But there is something going on here. The GOP has made a mistake. I think Katie Hobbs is not the best Democratic nominee that they could get, but considering who the options were, probably one of the better ones. She definitely has her own issues and definitely has things that could arise and make it more difficult for her to win win her election this November. But what I will say is that Democrats seem to have it a lot more together than the Republicans do in this state. Because on the Senate election, they have Mark Kelly, who is an incumbent, who ran unopposed in this primary, who was never going to face real opposition. The state of Arizona and the governors and Senate races here are very, very important because they could truly determine even a presidency at a different point in time. But the chances have certainly shifted in favor of the Democratic Party by a pretty significant amount over the past week alone. With Kari Lake's nomination to the governorship, to the Republican nominee for governor, with Blake Masters' nomination to the Republican nominee for senator, Democrats have increased their chances and are probably going to continue to do so. These nominees capitalized on some extremist tendencies, extremist platform points, just an overall extremist persona, one that was very closely associated on every single level with President Donald Trump, because they would not have won their primary without him. Looking at the results, I am, seeing it, and I would say if I was a Republican looking at this race, I would be very apprehensive about expecting to win this state that Republicans currently hold in the governorship, and that they can also easily win from the Democrats in the Senate election. But simply, that isn't happening. We will see what happens this November. I am more confident now with the respective nominees, Kari Lake in the governorship, Blake Masters in the Senate election, that Democrats do better in the state of Arizona. My predictions thus far in Arizona have been a lean Democrat characterization on the Senate level, but for the governorship, I've had it as tilt Democrat, At different points, I've had it as Republican just simply because of our national environment. But looking at where we are today, I think the Democrats do better with Kari Lake as the nominee. If it was Karen Taylor Robson, I would have already had it as a Republican victory. So just something to think about. Definitely different options, better candidates on the ballot here that lost their elections largely in part to Donald Trump's interference in this election. And we will see what happens this November as a result of some pretty unfortunate choices for Arizona GOP. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today. Sorry, tomorrow.